Um, the context of this presentation is really geared for us to speak to our young people, speak to your children about the dangers of vaping. And so please note that I'll be asking questions that you will want to phrase to your your student, your child, to be able to help them think critically about the dangers of vaping. So it will feel like I'm speaking directly to you. This is the context with which I offer you to present to your child, and I can always be available to anyone after this, and I'll give you my information. Okay, so good afternoon. Vaping Talks. We can change the slide. So who are we? As I just said, we are Highpoint Prevention Services. We're prevention services of Highpoint Treatment Center. We provide substance use prevention services to 11 cities and towns in southeastern Massachusetts. So just to give you some context, overdoses, deaths are 100,000 plus a year and growing. Confirmed opioid-related deaths in Massachusetts in 2020 were 2,106. And some more context is more than 5 people died daily in Massachusetts due to opioid overdose. So those are just some statistics that talk about the plague of drug addiction in our immediate community, and vaping is considered a drug addiction. Okay. So the teenage brain, as we all know, is still developing. It's important to be careful with the kinds of rewards we give our brain, because our brain associates rewards with pleasure, which then motivates us to repeat a specific behavior. So that's not unlike anything we've experienced as you're rearing your child or being a guardian or parent. We want to highlight when they're doing something great because we know that that repetition of that reward behavior will likely increase that our young person will continue to do the right thing. While using drugs, alcohol, vaping, nicotine, marijuana, etc., will continue to give the brain that experience of a reward or pleasure. So they'll feel good, feel better, do better with a reward system, but the drugs and alcohol mimics that same experience that we've been teaching them since a very young age. So early use of drugs and alcohol will put students at the risk of developing a problem with them long term. So it's not just as simple as, oh, I'm just vaping and they're going through a phase. Obviously, there's a more critical component to that. We can move on. So obviously the students since COVID and historically in high school, middle school, kids are feeling the stress of fitting in, the stress of doing well in school, the stress of their bodies changing, their lives changing. There's good stress. And we ask them, and I encourage you to talk to your young people to think about stressful events, like asking them, can you think of a stressful event that afterwards made you feel stronger, right? Sometimes the only way around something, we say in counseling, is through it, right? They have to experience something, and on the other side, with reflection and work, they're often stronger. Then there's bad stress. It's important to be aware of how much stress the body can tolerate. That goes for all of us as caregivers, parents, providers. We always want to be measuring the stress so that we can try to control the amount of stress that's happening. That's something we want to talk to our young people about daily. How are you feeling? How's it making you feel? You have this test. Do you feel stressed out? Are you sleeping well? Do you feel exhausted? Do you feel fatigued? All of that stress, you want them to be able to name and identify. It will help you empower them to choose a way to cope that isn't going to be the use of drugs, alcohol, or vaping. Okay, are there any questions about that? Okay. So we talk about coping skills. We talk about adaptive versus maladaptive. We can move on to the next slide. So adaptive skills, those are the good ones, right? When we identify that stress, or we ask our young people to think about that test or that dance coming up that maybe they're stressed about being asked or asking someone else to. All of those things, we want them to identify, how is that making you feel, like we said in the earlier slide, and what can we do to help us cope when that stress comes, and it will come. Exercising, drawing, yoga, sometimes just listening to music with your student or encouraging them to just lay back and put on some good music, dancing, coloring, journaling is always a great thing to encourage. It gives the child, the young person, a chance to really reflect about the situation that they're in, doing that pro and con list, or simply just writing how they're feeling. I feel stressed about this test. Why? Ask them to consider who, what, where, and why of the stress, okay? Particularly when journaling. Sometimes going shopping or window shopping, we may want to, we don't want to start a system where spending money or that reward pleasure of receiving and getting something will feel like something they'll want to continue to repeat. Pardon me. Oh, I'm sorry. If we can go back, my apologies. Spending time with a pet, punching the bag. So I like the punching bag opportunity because it gets out that sort of frustration, jogging in place, taking a walk around the block, doing some sit-ups, something that exerts your body where the endorphins are flowing, where you'll get a physiological response can help. We talked about dancing. Sometimes encouraging your child to just have a good cry. Sometimes just encouraging them to call a friend, talk to somebody they trust. Oftentimes they won't really want to talk to us about particular problems, but really encouraging them, hey, why don't you pick up the phone and call that person, can be helpful. Or sometimes just cleaning or organizing the room. Sometimes stress causes a lot of chaos. So doing something like folding the laundry, getting one portion of their life in place during a stressful moment can often be helpful. Thank you. So back to maladaptive substances used to cope during stress. So vaping is really a way to get a substance into your body, not a drug itself. Of course, I very rarely hear of a vape that doesn't have some kind of a nicotine or a marijuana component. They do have zero oils. Apparently, those still have a very negative effect on anyone's body, but particularly the young body. So do you know what is in the vape you're using? Asking questions like that to a young person can be helpful as well. Just let them think. It's not really the preachy aspect of it. It's like, well, do you know where it's coming from? Do you know what's being put into your body? And then, of course, the natural next question, does that matter to you? Do you vape in social situations or alone? Really asking your child to examine that. Oftentimes, I'll hear young people say, well, I only do that when I'm at a party. And they don't really understand the correlation with beginning to use at a party because it's addictive, will then find yourself using alone. And that's kind of like a scope for them of reference, a frame of reference for them to understand. Take a look back. Were you at first doing it on weekends with friends, and now you find yourself maybe sneaking it alone? And then they can start to use their own critical thinking skills as a barometer about how they maybe had the entry point into the use and where it's expanding in their world. If you didn't vape before, why are you vaping now? Really having them think critically, again, is more empowering than the preachy. Asking questions to young people that let them be the voice for why they're using without judgment is challenging as a caregiver and a parent, but it really will be the most effective way of trying to reach them. Maybe even asking them, do you know someone who's tried to quit vaping but can't? And oftentimes they'll self-report to you. Oh yeah, my friend's been trying for a while and they can't quit. Well, you don't want to be that person, right? I think we find that with the young people, they always want to have some frame of control over their use. And so encouraging them to ask questions and think critically about it is more empowering than maybe talking at them. So we try to frame their thinking with questions. Thank you. Move on. Smoking cigarettes, talking to your child about cigarettes, the why and the why not. Often cigarettes can be a gateway to vaping, or vaping is a gateway to cigarettes, depending upon its availability and expense, which I'm sure you all know. Again, this is the maladaptive behavior, encouraging them that, why are you picking up and beginning to smoke a cigarette or use? Is it really just socially at a party? Is it a form of coping for stress when you're upset about something, arguing, stressed out about a test, or fitting in socially? So nicotine, here's a fact that many of us know, but it's worth repeating to our young people. Nicotine is just as addictive as heroin, alcohol, and cocaine. And I think many of our young people have the misconception that when we're talking about vaping or nicotine, we're not talking about a deadly drug as a deadly addiction, which it is. So offering that, I think, is important. So vaping, as I said earlier, contains nicotine and other harmful chemicals. We ask them to think about, what are you putting in your body? Who's manufacturing that? Where's that coming from? How in control are you as a young person if you don't know what you're putting in your body? Just gives them food for thought. And quitting, associated with reduced anxiety, stress, and depression. That's also an important piece for them to know, that when they can replace the use of vaping or cigarettes with one of these adaptive coping skills, the exercise, the singing, the calling a friend, taking a walk, organizing something small, it will impact their anxiety level, stress level, and help eradicate depression. Again, we're talking about this as a method of coping. Oftentimes it can start socially, but because it has an addictive component, it always ends up being connected to the alleviation of some stress, or bring it back to our opening slide, that reward in the brain. The brain starts picking it up as this is a good thing for us. So again, arming them with the facts, the THC then versus now. The amount of THC in cannabis products has increased over the past few decades. So some may have memories of like the hippies or back in the day where, it was this natural plant. Oftentimes, and particularly with vaping, we are not talking about a natural substance, okay? Encouraging them to understand the laws. Everybody has heard by now, perhaps, of the basketball player who had the oil in the airport that had a very small amount of marijuana. And while they are in a Russian international prison, and one could assert that those laws are just applicable there is a legality factor to a young person using cannabis now, that you often hear them say, well, it's legal now. It's legal in the state. It may be legal in the state, but it is not legal for a minor to be using cannabis. So what they think is a negligible thing can still have an impact for them in the court system. So that's an important thing. Again, waiting for the effects when they're using the cannabis and the oil. If they overdo it, they can really have an adverse reaction that will be really similar to any drug that you are overusing. Oftentimes they won't get the immediate feeling. So you really want to encourage your young person, if they are going to be experimenting, and many of them will, unfortunately, that they want to be mindful about the space and time that they're attempting to try this, right? Just having open and honest dialogue about the dangers. Again, as hard as that may be for a caregiver and a provider, I encourage you to arm them with facts rather than sort of the preachy aspect that many of us have tried to no avail. It falls on deaf ears. Again, I can't impress upon you enough, empowering them with the facts. Oftentimes you'll find you've done your job and your child will make the right choice when we encourage them to think critically. So the old adage, it's not a drug, cannabis is not a drug, it's a plant, it's natural. Again, these days, that component has changed, particularly when it's vaping in the oils. It is a mind-altering substance, and it's important that they know that. And everybody's reaction to it will be different. So while they may think it's seemingly negligible thing, everybody's doing it, I'm going to take a little hit, empowering them with the facts. Your hit may be very different. We don't know what's in it. It's a chemical. It's not natural. We don't know who's manufacturing it. And once you put it into your body, we won't know what the result is. So that's something that we like to tell young people. Again, empowering them is the key. We can move on. Okay, so when is use a problem? Most times people realize that they have an issue with alcohol at the point when the consequences outweigh any benefits that they were getting from it, right? So we want to do the same thing with vaping or with marijuana use. We want to get them, again, thinking critically about, when is it becoming a problem? Have you gotten in trouble in school? Do you know a friend who's gotten in trouble in school? Have you known anyone who's taken too much and had a bad reaction to it? These are the kinds of things we want to always give them a barometer with which to take a temperature about their own use, or maybe the use of a friend that they've observed. Okay, so how to help. When someone you love is struggling with substance use, and it may not appear to be such a thing that they're having consequences, they haven't gotten kicked out of school, they haven't had a situation where they've had to get to the hospital, but using these substances because we know they ultimately are poor for the health, that's a struggle, right? So we want you to also understand the spectrum of problem. Any young minor child using any version of this, it's a problem, right? So when someone you love is struggling with substance use, there is no one size fits all approach. The process of getting them help looks different for everyone, but the following steps can help you. So helping your young person, what you can say, I want to talk to you because I'm worried. Again, we don't want to be preachy, accusatory, or argumentative. We want to frame things with a question so we can empower the young person to think about the choices that they're making to benefit themselves. Suggest they talk to somebody. If it isn't even you, as challenging as that can be, we have services at Highpoint Treatment Center for Adolescents and beyond. And certainly we could get your child in relatively swiftly to talk to someone to get that help. If you feel like you're out of position, we are here to help. Again, encouraging them to speak to somebody, maybe even within the school, who could also reach out to us as well. Assure them that they're not alone. Again, it's that posture of not preaching, but look, we are all faced with these choices every day to eat, overeat, drink, not drink. This is something that they're going to be facing for the rest of their life. And so empowering them at a young age to think critically about the choices they make without a lot of pressure from you is just really a gift, and inviting them to take control over their life and the choices that will govern them. And then don't give up. Don't let up, right? If they're resistant at first, you can invite in a trusted someone at school, a trusted teacher, reaching out to programs like Highpoint, a school adjustment counselor, or maybe a trusted aunt, friend, or neighbor or coach who you think your child might listen to, and onboard them to partner with you. We can move on. Take drugs and alcohol out of the mix. What do you fill your cup with? This is a great question to ask your young person. We can move on to the next slide. Thank you. So you're not alone. We want them to know, again, just what I said in the previous slide, asking for support, asking clarifying questions about the use of vaping or drugs or alcohol. They can certainly use the crisis text line for privacy. I encourage you to write down what you see before you. There's the National Helpline of Substance Use and Mental Health. That 800 number, 1-800-662-4357, is a number you may want to have available. Again, having your young person empowered to reach out for themselves makes a difference. The mobile crisis intervention line is 1-877-382-1609. And My Life, My Quit text, start My Quit to 36072 can also start them with a dialogue and a conversation where they can ask questions in an environment that they love, texting, and that will just be between them and a provider. Engage, connect, and empower. We talked a lot about empowering. I can't impress upon you enough that empowering the young person to address their substance use is the most important gift that you will give them. We want them to know that even if they're choosing to use vape or otherwise now, there is always space to invite in the possibility of stopping or at least examining the use in their own lives. So the Brockton Prevention Area Collaborative is one place, and the Plymouth Area Prevention is another place. And again, Highpoint Treatment Center right here in New Bedford. Does anyone have any questions about anything we went over?
I know that we had some families that had just like some questions about like the differences of between like traditional cigarettes and what vaping is and what makes it more dangerous than like your standard traditional cigarettes. And I think that like that's something, considering how the industry continues to develop them, might be something to touch upon, because I don't think even we as adults really understand why there's so much more dangerous than, because
Yeah,
sometimes it even looks like candy, like like, you know what I mean? It's like,
sure. And unfortunately, that's part of the problem, and that's why, you know, it's gotten a heightened use with young people, because they were flavors like cherry and cotton candy, etc. And that pleasure zone in the brain associated with candy and all of the treats that all of our young people have been experiencing their whole life made that gateway, that pathway, such an easy place. That pleasure zone was immediately taken hold of, where somebody might have to build up their tolerance to a cigarette at first. The vaping it's such a pleasure zone because it's sweet, it's a treat, and it's also giving you the effects of nicotine, which are very addictive, like heroin. And so in terms of the physiological, what's more dangerous, I know it to be that they are both equally dangerous, but that the vaping, because it has that component of, it doesn't have the smell of a cigarette. They might be in their bedroom. You light up a cigarette in your room, someone's going to know. You're vaping and it smells like cotton candy, cherries, or grape. It's a little different. So there's also that heightened, I'm sneaking and I'm doing something, which is part of that age group, right? The experimentation of trying something new and claiming it as your own. And there's always the cool factor, right? The vape pens and all of those things that come along with vaping. There's always that cool factor along with what cigarettes have always been, right? Historically, you're one of the cool kids if you're doing, smoking or daring to do something that is a no-no, right? So they're equally as dangerous, and the vaping is even more so because of the flavors, like vaping, hookah, all of that. And they'll use it more because it
tastes like candy. So no, that's really insightful, because like I just turned 31 on Monday.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. And so like I didn't grow up with vapes. So when I started working in the public school system, I'm like, what is this? This wasn't around when I was in college. It wasn't around when I was in high school. And I didn't grow up with smokers, and so like it was never like an issue for me. But like if you're gonna give me something that tastes like a cherry, and like it just seems like an easier opportunity to have more kids trying and experimenting. So I didn't even know that like it looks like candy, but it also tastes like candy. That's a thing.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Many of us remember, do you remember the cough drops, the Ludens and the Secrets,
Yes.
things like back then? We're like, didn't really have a cold, but like everybody was having the cherry. It's sort of that same thing where even if they have a propensity to want to try it, or you don't smoke in your house, if your friend next to you is like, taste this is so sweet, this is yummy, and you get this feeling, and it helps me like when I'm stressed out or my parents are stressing me out, this is like really easy for them to get into, just like I don't have a cold, but I'm taking the cherry cough drop kind of thing. Any other questions?
We have a pretty small group, so if anybody wants to unmute themselves and ask a question, they're welcome to. Oh, Sharon has a question.
I have a question.
Hi, sure.
Hi. I was concerned that the kids could put stuff into the vape pens, because my husband told me when our son was started to vape that there was no nicotine in them. And I'm like, I don't know much about it, but I didn't believe that because I figured there was something they were going after. If they kept doing it, it had to be for some reason. And it was probably figured they were, I don't know. I just hear that they're getting a lot of other kind of drugs through them. But if they're buying them in the store, my husband said they can't put anything into them.
Yeah.
So that was one question I had. And the other is, you kind of answered it though, that one isn't really more dangerous than the other. Because I was thinking about the oil sticking to the cells more. I don't know.
There are studies, those are great questions. Thank you for those questions. So there are studies that talk about the oils being more dangerous and blocking off the oxygen. And there's like a whole molecular piece that I won't attempt to convey to you, but I do encourage you to Google. But the way we in the field are talking about it is it's really important that they understand that both are deadly. And that's how I start. Both are addictive and both are poor choices for the human body, no matter how we size it up. So I consider them equal because for me, they're both deadly. But I do encourage you to examine the biological structure of how that all breaks down. And yes, indeed, there are many studies that suggest that vaping is even worse than cigarette smokes. And so many young
people, because what I see is they just keep sucking on that vape pen, whereas with the cigarette, you finish it and you put it out. But that vape pen is in the pocket and they can just keep hitting on it all day long.
Exactly. And that repetition of behavior, what started out as a simple, I'm exploring or I'm having fun at a party, will become habitual quicker. We've got the taste, we've got the sweetness, and we've got the fact that we were saying in your bedroom, you pull out your vape pen, the smell dissipates. It dissipates fairly quickly, most of them. And so you get into this like behavioral pattern where it will easily become a problem for them quicker than the cigarettes will. And so again, I don't want to discourage or misrepresent that vaping has not been proven worse, because I do know that there are many studies that say that the vaping, it will have a quicker, more rapid detrimental effect on young people than the cigarettes. You can go 10, 20 years before it's a problem. And what they have found in many of the studies, and again, I encourage you to Google vaping studies, that many young people have lost limbs due to oxygen being cut off.
Really?
And it happens fairly quickly. These were not kids who were using for a decade like we were finding out about the cigarettes, right?
Yeah.
Happening at a much more alarming rate and with much more quickness than the results of a cigarette. So for many of those patients, it is scary. And to address your initial question about what can be put in them, when you purchase some of the vape pens, they're already filled. But many of them you can fill yourself. And so you can choose these different oils, and it's a little bit less expensive when you buy one that you can fill yourself. And so anything can be put into those. And so when a friend is handing you off of a bottle, nobody knows what they've put in there, because the oil, oftentimes a powder substance, a fentanyl, will dissolve in that, as an example, and you don't know what you're putting in there. And again, the preachy part or the it always feels accusatory when you're telling a young person, like, think about what you're doing. But when you're asking a question, like, I don't know what's in it. I don't know if I'm putting anything in my body that I don't know what's in it. Is that how you're doing it? Is that how you're living? And those are the choices you're making? If it is, I can't help you. Should that go awry as your parent, your guardian, your counselor? Those are the choices that you're going to make. And I'm going to arm you with the facts. We don't know what's in that. It looks like oil from here, but I can't tell you what's in that. That's the risk you're taking. I encourage you to know that comes, I always start with death and addiction, and addiction leads to death more often than not. So I'm not afraid to name it for them because I think it's an empowering choice. If that's what they're choosing, and you see that after you've asked those critical questions, then you want to get help for them in a way that's like, well, I don't think you're making the choice that is healthy for you. So I'd like you to talk to this person, but, give them the choice, the information so that they can make a choice. It makes the conversation for you easier.
Okay.
Those are
Yeah, he wants to stop. He spends all this money on a vape pen, right? Throws it away. He does a couple puffs. I don't want to do this, throws it away. And then the next day he's spending more money on it. And I know he wants to not do it, but he feels now, of course, like anybody who's addicted to anything, that I got to have it now. I'm feeling sick,
And that's real. That's
yeah.
the feeling that that they're having. Your child, did you say he?
He.
That's a real, and so even validating that, and even with the spending this money, throwing it in the trash, it's kind of it encourages me that he's continuing to try, right? And that there was that one slide that said just keep trying. So the fact that you're here today and you can bring back a few new pieces of information and encourage him that, hey, this is part of the process. One day you won't buy it again, so that's okay. And sometimes the cost benefit analysis of like, gee, let's just add up how many pens you bought this week, but how cool is it that you keep trying? And when they look at that, I mean, use all of those different entry points to have the conversation. And where he's so close, I encourage you to consider calling an organization like ours, like Highpoint, where he can work with somebody about smoking cessation directly and take some of the pressure off of both of you. I highly encourage you to do that.
Yeah, it might be a good idea. You can't always learn from your parents, because I smoked for 38 years and I've been off of them for 16. And he sees my lungs. I have the COPD. And I'm like, really? Because he has asthma. He's had it since he was a baby. And it, doing this makes his health worse. And can't teach them by your mistakes, unfortunately. They have to feel it themselves, I think.
Yeah, that's true. And thank you for your willingness to share and be vulnerable about your own process. I have to commend you that you're living proof that one can quit. So thank you for that. And I think that's exemplary for everyone to hear who will hear this, and for you to continue to remind your son the consequences of your COPD were a direct result of those choices. So I appreciate your bravery for being vulnerable. And I'm really proud of you that you quit. Thank you for encouraging all of us that there is a way, a better way, and that it's possible.
Thank you. It was just, couldn't breathe anymore. It was just simple as that. It was an inhaler and a cigarette, or a cigarette and then the inhaler. I was like, oh boy, this has gotten really bad. Now I'm on 3 inhalers and a breathing machine. So he sees this, he's aware of it. And I really don't know why he started, but I don't think there's an answer to all those things. All the kids are doing it's one thing, right? I understand that.
Oftentimes. And lots of people are quitting, just like mom. So again, I encourage you to put the system in place now, and perhaps time with a clinician would be helpful. And if a one-on-one setting doesn't feel like that would be right for your child right now, I encourage you to reach out to us at Highpoint. We do have different cessation classes and groups and things that.
Oh, you have groups for them? Yeah, that might be good.
So
that would be really good. I think that would be helpful. Because if it's one-on-one, sometimes he feels like we're accusing him, like you were talking about.
Yeah. Sometimes groups are easier, and we do have them at Highpoint. They may not directly speak to vaping, but they certainly speak to addiction, and you will have that support. So I encourage you to have them try different options. And I encourage everybody listening, we talked about in the last slide, one stop shopping, one size does not fit all. It will take the framing of the critical questions, encouraging them to think critically. It will take examples, it will take group, it may take one-on-one. But certainly all of those resources are at your fingertips through Highpoint and through the school.
Yeah, I would, I really like to get into the medical, how it specifically affects your body medically, so he can have that information to go by. But thank you for all the information today. I've been feeling kind of alone with that, because my husband, he just takes the path of least resistance with it, and because he smokes. So that might have something to do with it.
Right.
And my son says, well, when you quit smoking, I'll quit vaping. So there you go.
There you
Kids
go.
have a way of wanting to throw everything back
The
to you.
ultimatum between the two of them. Who it's playing chicken. Who's gonna quit?
I just let them go at it, and I just, like, I would get mad. I was angry. Why are you doing this to yourself? And then I just said, look, if you're going to do it, you don't have to hide it from me anymore. He's 18. Right. So it's not like he's 14. I said, just, if you're going to do it, just do it. I'd rather you not just be like having a party upstairs in your bedroom with all the kids sitting up there vaping or something. I'm not cool into that, because I feel like, I don't know, but can that be like having cigarette smoke in the house? Can it affect my lungs as well? Like secondhand smoke?
That's a good question. I can't answer that directly. I know that it's not healthy, right? They don't allow vaping in the hospitals. They don't allow them. I mean, it's not healthy.
Yeah.
Again, that is what I will say to that. Does it have the effects of secondhand smoke? My guess is that it is not a direct correlation, but there is a negative component to that.
Because you said it kind of dissipates, right? Real easy in the air.
It does. It dissipates very quickly, but that does not mean that there aren't spores in the air, much like cigarette smoke, that still linger or cling to the clothes. Like anything with nicotine has spores. That's attaching. The cannabis, I don't know how that works. I would encourage you to look at that. But again, I can promise you, in everybody, that nothing good will come from it. There's the death component and the addiction component. And which will come first, I don't know, but they will always coincide. And so that I encourage you to bring in another party, because the testing with the father, you quit, I'll quit, that's just substantiating, his addiction choice, because he knows dad is making a choice like that. So again, when it comes to that, it's time to bring in a third party. And again, I invite you to reach out to us. I mean, I feel like this is a commercial. It's not. It's really a resource for you. This is a resource in your community, and it sounds like your child would really benefit from either.
You're not far from where we live. The Highpoint, you're just right down the road, actually. Belleville, right down on Belleville, North Highpoint. Hello.
So our office, I don't know if Tara, we have one on Belleville, but I'm referring to 68 North French Street.
Yeah, so 68 North Front Street is our outpatient.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I think I know where you are. There's used to be where the Department of Child and Family used to be located back there. Somewhere down that road.
Yeah, so it's near the Market Basket almost.
Right. Okay.
I was going to say, I don't know where they used to be, but it's 68 North Front Street is the exact address.
Okay.
And you can call.
We do have other offices, like we have inpatient programs, and we do have other programs, but these particular services that Kelly's referring to are based out of the North Front Street location.
Okay. Well, that's the closest to us.
I also put that website, the My Life, My Quit website in the chat, which is a great resource as well.
Okay. Thank you.
And if you need more help navigating Shannon, you can give Katie a call on tomorrow, and she can give you more information. And I also put my email in the chat as well. So you can
Okay.
shoot me an email and I can send you some more resources. Okay.
Thank you.
Does
I
anybody-
appreciate it,
Of
everyone.
course.
I'm gonna run. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Does anyone else have any last burning questions or any thoughts to share? No? Well, I thank you very much for your time, and I thank the New Bedford Public Schools for inviting us in. We're always happy to participate and be a partner in the community to educate and be a resource. So thank you all.
Thank you, Kelly and Tara. We'll definitely be partnering with you guys in the future. We find that it's easiest to be able to have conversations with families in really like fun, active, interactive ways. And we've kind of like been experimenting with new ways of reaching out to families this year now that kind of COVID mediations have kind of calmed down. So we're hoping to have you guys on board for some more projects that we're thinking about in the future. So I will keep you guys updated on that. But we always appreciate your partnership and we really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Have a great night, everybody.
Bye-bye, you too.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.